Good afternoon. It is Ways and Means. Today is February 24th. We are really making progress through the calendar here. And it's Tuesday. It's Ed Finance Tuesday, just like every other Tuesday. So fun. So we are going to start with our now weekly school budgets update from Kelly and Ted. You want to join us? Thank you. And y'all, next time we do this, which will be in 2 weeks, we'll have the town meeting votes. And usually the School Boards Association sort of tracks all those votes and then shares them with us. The delightful service they do.
Good afternoon. This is becoming a more regular thing for me, Kelly Murphy, Education Finance Director. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We do have some new numbers for you. So just getting started here. So just going through the whole kind of song and dance. So the deadline for these budgets for the preliminary collection was February 15th. When we came in last, we didn't have everyone in that we were anticipating. At this point, I can say that we do not have all the budgets. So right now, as it stands, we've got 105 of the 122 or 119 if you're not counting the unorganized towns. And that's about where we were last year at this time. So I think that that's pretty good progress. And so what we have been collecting are the budgeted expenditures, offsetting revenues, and calculated education spending. And so that puts us at about 88% in at this point. In terms of the long-term weighted ADM and the budget, we're at about 93%. So it's a pretty significant amount of the budgets are in, and you kind of see what those factors are in that bullet. And so this puts us at 4.2%. And so that's slightly lower than last week. We're at 4.3 last week. And so a good showing, I'd say. Each week we've been bringing it into focus just a little bit more, and we're sort of getting to the point where it's only by shades and hairs. So it's not, a ton different from what you saw last week. And so then just scooting on down here to the tables that we've been sharing each week. The budgeted expenditures, there's a change of 3.6% of the budgets that are in. You'll notice that there's a shift in the offsetting revenue where it's 0.6% to the good or positive rather than sort of the negative in those revenues being offsetting. And then you can see where education spending is here at the 4.2%. And so the second table that we've got here just shows where we were on December 1st and where we are now currently with the projections built in. And so that's what I have for today. And I can blow this up a little bit just so you can.
Anyone have any questions? Thoughts? Yeah, Representative.
So, can you clarify for me, maybe us, but certainly for me, what that 4.2% is and what can we expect from that? I mean, what's the impact on our taxpayers?
So the impact on the taxpayers we'll get from Julia.
Okay, all right.
That was easy.
Yeah, Representative Odie and then Holcomb.
Thank you. So do you have the numbers for how much health insurance premiums and healthcare costs went up for the entire state compared to and how that folds into this 4.2% increase?
Do you mean specific to these budgets? So we right now have collected sort of the preliminary higher level information. So in those 3 categories that I referenced earlier, but when we get the final budgets in, we will be getting more of the budgeting detail in. So I would be able to sort of a statewide assessment of what healthcare costs would be at this time, but we don't have that in this version. And it's all wrapped in, of course. We just don't have it to pull out.
It's fair to say that, is it fair to say that the health expenses for all school employees went up in double digits this year? Is that double digits or single?
I don't know that I could say that. Because I think it would be dependent on those districts and their experience. I think we might be able to show, an average of an increase. But I'm not sure what the increase would be at this time. It's certainly a cost driver.
It makes depending on what that information is, it makes the 4.2% seem like a huge effort to get to 4.2, considering the other pressures, especially that one.
Yes.
Okay.
Representative Fulcom.
Thank you. Do you have any data on who has not submitted a budget at this point? And are they substantively similar to or different from the ones that already have?
You're having pop-ups from your email.
Okay, well, I might stop the share now. Thank you for that.
You leave those people away from me.
You know, why not? So we do have details on budgets that are not in. They are who we would anticipate seeing at this time, so compared to last year. And, in the last round, some of the budgets that we didn't have in yet were some of the good sized districts that we wanted to see in this collection, and we do have them now. Thank you.
Thank you. That was one of my questions as well. The change in the reserve, or sorry, the offsetting revenue, can you talk about that a little bit?
So that's based on the budgets that did come in, and so some of them were using probably more offsetting revenues than the other budgets that we had received previously, and so it just bumped it up a little bit.
Are you, to what degree are you going to be able to have eyes on how much is still on the bottom line for districts that they could have used as offsetting revenue? Does that question make sense?
It does.
Okay.
And it's an interesting one. I mean, so we could certainly get at that information. What we currently have, we collect through a supplemental worksheet, which is in the stat book. And so it's sort of backward looking, like it's not sort of a real point in time collection. We could certainly gather details on that information if you're interested.
Yeah, I very much so.
Just wondering how much powder's left in them, okay?
Sure, yeah.
Okay,
That's what that means.
let's go.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
How much powder is left in the keg?
Not that we're blowing anything up under any circumstance.
I truly didn't hear. I was in my head.
I don't think you have to write it down.
Use of reserves.
Yes.
And whether it's, how significant of a difference, I'm asking myself, how significant a difference would it make? Whether we have or not have policy about reserves, and how much does it really impact that final number from year to year? Maybe someone's holding a reserve because of everybody likes to talk about a gymnasium floor, but gymnasium floor, they're saving up for 2 years, and then that's done, and then they wouldn't have much of a reserve in subsequent years. I just wonder about if you could tell me anything you can tell me about, does it make a big difference? Considering everything, look at that over time.
So I'm going to try to answer what I think you're asking me, which is that, so with the reserves, I think that they are important. I think that there is also variability and sort of the difference between different districts and the types of reserves that they would have available to them. And so I think just generally they're important, and they are a financial management tool. And I think depending on policy, it's helpful just to kind of even have a common understanding of expectations. So I think that might be helpful.
Common understanding of what again?
So
I think we're gonna,
this is kind of a teaser.
it was funny. So Representative Odie, the next item on our agenda is reserve guidance.
All right, I was really specific.
Yes.
Wondering about the numbers, how much the numbers on that sheet are really gonna change if we
If we what?
if we have some kind of reserve policy and define reserves and that's what I'm asking. If you have any sense, there's millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Well, I think there's an interesting question about districts that would need to put more in their reserves and would need to increase their spending in order to do that. And then there's the districts who might have more in their reserves than a max and it would then become offsetting revenue in that sheet. So I wonder if you could speak to that.
So I mean, it's dependent. It depends on what people have, you know, currently. I think it also depends on what their, you know, financial profile is, what they've got coming down the line. So you referenced a gym floor, for example, you know, there may be some construction costs. And so I think depending on, you know, what is happening in that district, they may have more or less on the bottom line. I think guidance would be helpful to help make sure that there's enough.
Enough for them to have on their bottom line.
Yes.
So guidance, so they don't. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have any more questions about the numbers that we got from Haley? Okay. Seems like we're closing in on final numbers, which is great.
Yes.
Thank you. And then we'll have you back in just a minute to continue the exact same conversation.
Sounds great.
Done. Bye.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Happy Tuesday.
That's happy Tuesday. Thank. John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. This should be pretty quick. Maybe. I'm gonna pull up, you'll recall we went through a draft last week for reserve guidance that was updating the language requiring rulemaking to amend the district quality standards to include recommended reserve fund account standards. I had just 2 tweaks from last week, as I recall it. One, as you'll see here in highlight, is to require the agency to specifically adopt rules to define appropriate accounting terms to facilitate data consistency and improve data quality across the state. So this is looking for conformity, consistency across the state. The other was just changed to the effective date. This previously said July 1, 2026, now effective on passage. To the soonest that you could have this in statute or in law. That is it. That is all I have for you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Don about said language or thoughts about it or whatever type of talking you want to do? I just like, I always say questions and then I feel like people don't actually have to ask anyway.
Excited. I'm very excited.
Yes. Right.
I've stopped sharing and I'm standing.
Wait, Representative Maslin, do you have something?
Just to say, the obvious, you're asking a question.
Okay, good. I'm glad. Thanks. Do you have a question?
It's more of a mulling it over and thinking about it.
Okay. Would you like John to sit there while you mull or would you like him, or shall we mull?
No.
Okay, thank you, John. Great.
Specific question.
Great.
It was kind of like what I was talking about before, what problem are we trying to solve? Maybe I just need that spelled out. The problem we're trying to solve is X and this is why.
So when we first passed this, the problem that we were trying to solve was we were focused on district quality standards related to good financial practices. And wanted to make sure that districts had the same way sort of education quality standards, hypothetical, which I shouldn't talk about education quality, very vaguely are sort of support to districts to be focusing on instructions, type things like that. The district quality standards were focused on good governance, including fiscal stuff. We spent a lot of time looking at what Massachusetts, I believe, does for their district quality standards. And one of the areas that came up as having an enormous amount of variation around the state was reserve guidance. I think since then we've heard testimony from someone, I don't remember who, but I do think it was in the last few weeks. I don't think it was the Agency of Education, but maybe it was. About maybe Chris? About the fact that in talking to when a school board or a superintendent in talking to either their school board or their voters would be better able to engage in quality financial practices if we had guidance available to them about what those sort of quality financial practices were. In some districts, there might be a tendency to sort of spend everything on the bottom line because that's sort of what the cultural zeitgeist might be. And that by sort of putting this, by this being part of the district quality standards, those districts would have tools in order to engage in essentially like sort of best financial practices. But I don't really know if I answered your question. And that was me like really going into a little bit of a way back.
I
machine
needed
there.
that.
Okay.
I'm
Does anyone else want to add a refresh? Okay. Yeah.
Two questions. The first is just a legal clarification. What does the word prescribed mean in statute? Is that a mandate? Or is it a recommendation?
In this case, the requirement in the language is that they adopt specific rules to set these out, they accept them.
So they have to, they're going to state a minimum and a maximum to which districts have to adhere.
Yes, although I think if we start going down the path of what the effect of the district quality standards are, I think it would be helpful to bring in Beth, just because she's the one who knows that side.
You mean how much teeth sort of the district quality standards of?
I did pull up 16 BSA 165, but I know that Beth is the one who knows the best information on this.
Ask a follow-up, and this is a, I don't know what the basketball term is, but when you just throw a ball out, everyone jumps at it.
Surely.
Was a jump ball. Sorry for the mistaken, stop laughing at me.
Easier for that sports metaphor.
If we are moving to a foundation formula where the state is telling districts how much they spend per pupil, why are the reserves at the local level, not at the state level? And is that, I mean,
It's a really good question. There was a mess.
Why are we deciding this on local?
I was just a question, I don't.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Why are we setting budgets on local level?
No, that's a different question.
Okay.
You already voted on that one.
Understood. Talking how, I understood your question, I just phrased it incorrectly.
But why wouldn't a district want to have a reserve in case there is some unexpected thing that the foundation formula isn't designed to cover that comes up and they don't have enough capacity to raise supplemental district spending? Like, how are they going to cover that cost? Why wouldn't that be at a local level?
Because, I'm not arguing one way or against it.
I'm just trying to understand what you're.
Because,
where your
we,
question-
because if the state has prescribed what the level of funding was, and so the state is making the decision about what it needs to fund, and if you held the reserves at the state level, then the state would be flexible around the so-called conditions under which reserves were allocated. I'm not saying we should do this, I'm just saying that's the logical question that I think having a statewide foundation invites.
I'm so sorry. I have a question for John that I just realized. I'm so sorry, John. That I didn't ask while you're in the chair. When it says prescribed minimum and maximum balance levels, is that language broad enough to say that it could be percentage minimums and maximums, like based on how big the budget is? Because what's going to fit for one is not going to fit for the other. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I understood it. Okay.
But that's okay. Yeah.
Thanks, it's great, because I've been imagining percentages, but it's great that Billing should match that. Thank you. Yeah, Representative.
I wasn't thinking to the question that you asked, but I was also thinking, what if some, for example, we have state class size, student teacher ratio to this class size, requirement in 73. But we're allowing for people to go to the agency and to ask for an extension and another extension. So I wonder if we should have something that would allow for a district to go to the secretary to ask for guidance or an exception or whatever, which may.
I
maybe
think
not
there's a
bad idea.
process like that built into the district quality standards, but we can ask Beth for more.
Okay. And I was gonna say, it's probably not a bad idea, because if a district does go to the secretary, that raises and not a red flag, just raises a flag that, oh gee, maybe that district is struggling with something. Let's see what we can do to help that district out, get some other MASBO members to help each other out, whatever. I just, I wonder if we have to be so strict in this, and we're not even being strict in something else. Education.
And we can get more testimony about how the district quality standards and the education quality standards are enforced. Because I think that's sort of where your question's leading. So when I think more about the problem we're trying to solve here, sort of one of them could be, some districts are entirely spending down their reserves in the lead up to implementation of new districts, hypothetically. And other districts are really sort of preserving their reserves in a very serious way in order as a way of sort of preparing for new districts. And if two districts merge that have both been doing that with their reserves and two districts merge that haven't been doing that with their reserves, what does that mean for fairness in a new system? Or if one district has lots of reserves and the other district doesn't have a lot of reserves, how will they feel about coming together in a new system? So I think that's also part of the problem
See what you're
being solved, because I think lots of districts are making very different financial decisions in this very unstable, unclear policy environment we've created for them.
I see that. And then
And so this is a way of adding a little more clarity in a time of very little clarity.
all right, but on the way to becoming, several districts combined, I would think that doesn't happen overnight, that there have to be.
I don't think this will, let's get more about the district. I think you're imagining that this will happen significantly faster than it will.
But I wasn't. And
Oh, okay.
when you started saying those things, I thought, ooh.
Okay.
So if you're on the path to that, you would have time, I think. And would there be a written agreement? This is how things are gonna go on this day, and Charlie's shaking his head, yes.
It has to be.
So, yeah, I would think so too. So instead of maybe us trying to anticipate that, maybe we leave it to those people who will be, I'm just saying maybe. I have no horse in this race. That maybe we leave it to them as they are making agreements for how they'll come together to sort that stuff out. I was always thinking about all the districts together, and I was thinking about the numbers on the screen that we just saw. And now I'm thinking, when you bring up that example, it's reminding me that, yeah, but that's another thing to think about, the way it is today versus when things are consolidated, like.
Mhm.
So,
Kind of similar to the debt discussion we've been having, like
Yeah.
how do districts with different debt levels come together?
Yeah.
All about merging balance sheets essentially, of the
Yeah.
districts.
and do you envision that as something people sit down and they talk about, because it's very specific, factually specific, fact specific, or?
Well,
What do you
I think we're trying on the debt side, right, to come together with some guidelines at least about how debt is going to be treated as they come together. Because right now, the way folks are behaving with reserves impacts all of our tax rates, right?
That's right.
So you can imagine a district that's putting a whole bunch of fund balance left over from last year into a giant reserve that artificially keeps all of our taxes a little bit higher this year. It could be offset, but we don't have the numbers in front of us, right? By districts that are completely spending down every single thing they have, which is essentially kind of buying down our tax rates a little bit. But I don't know, because I don't have the numbers in front of me to say where that balance is coming out.
Yeah, yes.
Um,
I think, the other thing.
yeah, and the
I think
Agency of
that-
Education, I think, has something to add on this topic too, so we can have
What
them.
I'm
share.
thinking about is if, we're into year 1 or 2 of 73 of actually using a foundation formula, then, what happens? And maybe this is what they would want to talk about. What happens when you get a sum of money that and I know we're going to phase that in. I know these things, but if people just say, well, we're just not going to use it on reading intervention, we're going to buy a basketball.
Well, that's what
Either one is bad. No value judgment, but maybe we're thinking in our minds of something different than everybody else.
So I think that that's what the education, I mean, one, that can happen under current law, right? And so the idea is that the education quality standards and the district quality standards are what we have in place to work with that. And then the other piece that we just took one little bit of testimony on, but we need to do more work on is the intra-district equity question. Because we don't have quality standards or statute related to that. And that's an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And that was when we heard from Burlington School District. Is anyone, yeah, Representative Holcomb.
I just wanted to push back. I don't see debt as quite the same as reserve balance, because when you bring a building that is depreciated, that is a liability. When you bring debt, that's a liability. So I think it's a little different than a reserve account. So just want to say that I think we need a reserve policy, because if we are shifting to a tax foundation formula, which is now awarding some districts much more money than they've been used to getting, when we give them, twice as much per student for many of their students, I think the intent is that they spend it on improving educational opportunities for their students. But the other thing they could do, absent a reserve policy, is just bank it and take the tax holiday. So I think that's why this is coming up as a question. With respect to,
And I just, because I've raised this question before, I think the tax holiday thing is not a thing that can happen.
I don't think
Under
so.
law, so-
can it?
No.
No, so what
You know,
happens if they
again,
choose not to spend the money?
I have a son. I think about it all the time.
But
So I think we don't, I guess my answer is the way it's written, it seems like we don't know. I don't think we know.
So I think the way it's written, and I'll defer to John and Julia, the one thing that we do know is that they can't take a tax holiday because the tax rates are the
Okay,
same
so
for
they
like.
use that.
What we don't know is, are they forced to spend it? Will it sit there forever? Does it go back to the state? But the incentive to have it go back to the state when there's no tax relief,
That's-
relief, I was like gonna say return, I was like, that's something else.
Yeah.
Yes, it's different, yeah.
Can I ask the question I was trying to get to before we got to two? No,
Oh, okay.
no, there just was a lot of conversation. I agree on the intra-district equity. I think I'd be curious to know if we could model the impact in the context of tuition. Because when you're buying retail, not wholesale, you have a different issue or set of risks around reserves than if you are operating a school, and you can accommodate changes in enrollment with much less fiscal impact. It's just much less variable. And then also with respect to intra-district equity, particularly given what House Ed is talking about, but also inter-district equity, we actually have different sets of standards for different settings. And I think that has funding implications and probably has to be addressed as well.
Yeah, that's happening.
So it's all like private versus public.
Yes.
It's
Thank you. That was the, okay. Thank you. Representative Odie, and then I'm gonna, no, it's great. And then I'm gonna bring the Agency of Education.
I was thinking if we, go forward with this, with what we're talking about, and then we also allow, as schools are merging, we also allow, specific schools to make agreements to come together in a way that they see fit on this particular issue, for example, making agreements. I probably said this already, but that there's room for that. Is this true or not true?
I think that the Education Committee is working on whether the sort of articles of agreement process needs more definition to it than it has under current law. And so I would talk to our colleagues on that committee about it.
All right. Well,
Cool. But I do know that we've heard from the superintendents and especially the business managers
that the more we can make clear in advance, the sort of smoother their journey will be.
Okay, all right. All right. I just want to make sure that there's room for, we can't do everything at all.
Absolutely not.
So, that there's room for,
But we don't need to ask people to reinvent the wheel when we could have a wheel. Between the sports and whatever just
Yeah.
came out of my mouth, it's a rough day team. Okay. Kelly, hi, do you want to come back? Will you come back whether you want to or not? Thank you.
Great. So just for the record, Kelly Murphy, Education Finance Director. And I also do have Cassandra Ryan here with me, the Chief Financial Officer. And then I didn't introduce Ted earlier, but Ted's also here. Always a good wingman, our Senior Fiscal Analyst. So I can certainly share my screen if you'd like. We did prepare some comments on the language.
Thank you.
Chelsea, you can walk around and sit down if you want. That's totally fine, go for it. It's so nice to see you.
Okay, I'm not gonna go word for word, but what I do want to just express first is that first, we are committed to initiating rulemaking. So I just want to say that. We said that last time, but I wanted to make sure that's clear. I hope it is. And then we really also appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk about the specifics. So I'm just going to take it paragraph by paragraph without reading specifically from the text. But so for the first piece is that in the language, the proposed timeline is December 31st of 2026. And so I just wanted to flag this as we were kind of going through the language. We were really thinking in terms of key considerations that would help inform future recommendations. And so with this piece, I just want to register it because it could potentially abbreviate or shorten the length of time that we could pull in inputs from the districts and also what we may be looking at for language. So depending on how robust that process is, what we need to do for legal review and then the actual process itself. So just wanted to kind of get some guidance on the firmness of that date. If you would like to have sort of the rule in place by December 31st, or if it's in process, if that's sort of okay or not. I'm just raising sort of certain things that we've been thinking about as we've kind of been working through this.
I think there's an interesting, so there's sort of like a usual, and we were actually going to take testimony on rulemaking last week, and I really just lost it in the agenda. Or attorney just out of the bench. There's sort of an interesting construct that usually we focus on the date that rulemaking starts and not the date that rulemaking ends. And sometimes that means that rulemaking can go on for a very, very, very long time. And so we are trying to be clear that it's the deliverable we are interested in here. And if you shared back a timeline that was really explicit about how you could get to a different, very explicit endpoint, I'm sure we would be happy to consider that. Does that make sense?
That does make
Okay.
sense. And we could certainly bring some
Okay.
back to that effect. So the second piece, there's a couple of things in the definition of reserve funds. So we talked about the types of reserves, and then also there's consideration here wrapped up in the statute around the classification or purpose of that reserve. So for instance, if the reserve is truly for operational uses, that would be different than, say, construction. So we did cite the statutes here specifically associated with capital reserves and also with surplus, just because I think as we're working through this, we'll want to make sure that we're really clear on what that means and that we're in alignment. Because right now, depending on what the intention is, those things could potentially be out of alignment, or there may be different ways that guidance could be approached. So for instance, just thinking about construction first, in the statute right now, there is a timeline. There's a 5-year time period, but if you're thinking about a construction project, typically that would maybe longer than that. And so just contemplating, what do you mean, or what if you were going to set the standards for construction, for instance, wanting to make sure that there might be some, guidance there around what and when and for how long you could reserve that money. In terms of the surplus language, right now, as it is, the money kind of falls to the bottom line unless if a district were to assign some of that fund balance pre-audit, which would then categorize it differently than just having it fall to an unassigned line within the audit. So there's just some nuances there that we would want to really tease out. And so I'm just mentioning those things. We just wanted to flag them for the record. And there's certainly things that we're considering as we're talking through this with the business managers and also internally. So the next piece is this max min balance level. So there's a lot of variability right now in terms of what we see within individual districts, depending on what their, financial state is. And so I think just getting some clarity around what that means and making sure that it's a good size for all, because there is no one right size fits all. And so we did take a little bit of guidance from the Commission on States and from the districts and just thinking about GFOA and what the best practice is. And so the 2-month kind of operational balance is, I think, a good one. And we probably would consider that. But I think we'll want to try to figure out what a good balance would be between sort of establishing hard and fast maximum and minimums so that then they're used appropriately and in the way that they're intended. So just a little more language there. We would just want to be clear on what it would mean, how we'd be collecting it, and then just making sure that if there are caps, we're clear on what the understanding is, that there wouldn't be a penalty or that they might be binding. And so or there could be. It's just, I think just sort of thinking about what you might consider when considering sort of the thresholds or what the intent is with that. I'll just keep on going. So the next piece here contemplates just the predictability of sort of the expenditures and also thinking about credit ratings. So again, there's a lot of variability across the districts. And so we would want to make sure that we're preserving enough flexibility when we give guidance on how we get at some of these conditions. And then next, we're looking for clear guidance on how reserves will be replenished. So, the way that, money might fall to the bottom line can happen for a variety of different reasons. So it could be because of vacancy savings. It could be because, maybe there's a change in programming, maybe the amount that falls to the bottom line is attainable. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just the way that, it sort of happens through the course of time. And so just making sure that we've got some clear thoughts on that. These are the things that it's almost like a stream of consciousness a little bit, but these are the things that we're thinking about as we're thinking about reserve guidance. And then just want to make sure that I catch everything. This last paragraph here, we talked a little bit about the standard of 2 months, and we just want to make sure that we're finding a way to meet districts where they are. So I think I've captured all of the main points that are in the memo that we put together. And so we're still really thinking about what the language looks like and how we would implement what you put forward.
With the exception of the dates, which of this is sort of a request for change in the language that we have on the table, and which pieces are you making your thinking transparent so that when we're moving together, we're all on the same page?
So I think that the intent in putting this together was really just to be transparent in kind of our thinking and to sort of to call some of the questions that we have around, like, what the guidance might end up looking like. I don't think any of them are recommendations at this point. They're really considerations. And so I know that you would like our recommendations, but we sort of wanted to put this out there first before getting recommendations on the table, just so that we had a clearer understanding. So hopefully we can go there together.
Okay. And so for next steps, would you like us to get clearer in our intent related to these pieces you flagged? Or are you wanting to take these big questions to your other stakeholders and engage in rulemaking that way?
We could,
You don't have to answer that now, but that's if you'd rather not, but,
both.
okay, great. Great, yeah, Representative.
As a person observation, I really appreciate that you identified things that need definition. Because I think successful rulemaking depends on clarity around what it is that you're working with. And, reading the recent class size guidance, I realized that we probably should have done some work on definitions before asking for guidance. I also just noticed that, and my question is, I hope if there are other terms that you feel need to be defined specifically so that you are clear about what you need to do. And then the other is I did notice that you said a phased approach reduces the risk of unintended fiscal disruption and ensures that reserve standards are evidence-based and aligned with Vermont's broader education finance system. And I just am observing how much that parallels what tax has been saying in terms of go slow to get it right. And I just think it's worth reflecting on that.
Representative, this is way too detailed a question, probably. I don't know if I'm asking. So when I looked at the things that you were describing in the 2 months, a school district might know that there's a lawsuit they have to deal with coming up, or a workers' compensation claim they're going to deal with that would be maybe outside that 2-month reserve. You just talk about that. I don't want to say what you address.
Well, so I think two things. One is when you're starting with the audit and starting sort of with the report out of, sort of the actual amount that you have, available in reserves, then you know what you have and all of that, it's point in time. And so there are some things that you could probably plan for the use of that reserve, but there are some things that you wouldn't know about. You might not know about a lawsuit, but you know that you're going to have legal fees and you're going to need to try to use some of your fund balance for that. And so I think, and I'm not sure if I'm answering sort of the question that you've raised, but it's just making sure that there's enough flexibility in the bottom line to cover those one-offs. Is that sort of what you're getting at?
And I guess I'll offer that I was having a conversation with John Gray yesterday about the school district debt language that we're looking at. And that maybe we've been talking about in the context just of construction debt, but it might make sense to expand it slightly to like debt from a lawsuit, for instance.
I don't think of that as debt, but actually it would.
It's a like outstanding, it's a liability, yeah.
Yeah. And outsized compared to the 2 months, which is more, to me, is my mind more operating than sorry. If there's anything else I can think of to put in there.
Representative Kimball?
I was just wondering, in your letter, you're talking about surplus versus designated balances. And we had a conversation last week about a different chart of accounts and how many kind of types of reserves you might have. But just thinking about that out loud, without knowing the answer, can you give us an idea of how many types of designated reserves are in the school system? And then what is a surplus, which I'm thinking is an unobligated balance?
Well, so I mean, in the term surplus, you're going to have some of the definitions of reserves sort of wrapped up in it, because it is sort of like a bucket of funds. So we did pull together or pull. So actually, I'm going to share my screen again because I thought that you might ask about the uniform chart of accounts and what that might actually look like. And so I think that this will probably, and actually bear with me while I get this out of the way here. So just to kind of show you here, this is the I can make sure that we've got this in your records. It's not currently. But this is online, so this is our uniform chart of accounts. And just to kind of, I think, speed ahead to what you were looking for. What was it? So this just kind of outlines all the details, but these are the function codes associated with those charts, and I'm trying to get there on the fly. But right here, so you can kind of see the categorization of those functions. And so you've got the fund balances or net fund position. And so you've got the non-spendable funds, restricted fund balance, committed fund balance, assigned fund balance, and then the unassigned fund balance. And so these codes are specific to the types of classification that we talked about in the first presentation on reserve guidance. And so you can track the types, and then depending on what you're trying to do, you might classify those funds in a certain way. And so there are a couple, but they are standardized. They are standardized by accounting standards, and they are followed by the districts, and they're within the handbook.
Assuming there are probably some sub-accounts underneath each one of those account titles, numbers as well. So if you come up with a restricted fund balance, then restricted fund balance for this, for that, for this, you know.
Yeah.
And the requirement of having to re-spend any kind of unobligated fund balance in the, I can't remember the statute, but the requirement is that after it's been sitting in the accounts for 2 years, and then it has to be then reallocated in terms of spending that reserve, or is that not?
Are you speaking specifically to the surplus statute?
Yeah, yes.
I can certainly pull that up, and I would want you just to take a look at the specifics and then see, you know, how that's sort of, you know, working through in action.
I just can't remember the, yeah, when do you have to spend it and how much of it?
The surplus statute doesn't speak to any requirement to that effect. It's just that it carries forward as revenue unless you have a vote otherwise to put it in a reserve. And then the construction piece subjects after 5 years of holding those funds to excess spending at 150%. But I'm not aware of any independent requirement
They have to
2 year
spend it.
exactly,
Okay,
which is I think why you guys are in part having the conversation.
exactly. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the transparency and focus on the details. And that's gonna be-
Thank you.
We're gonna take, not a break. But, sorry, we're gonna move the yield bill with Julia. She's right there. I was jumping ahead to 3:15. Right here. Yeah, go ahead. There's a fun new piece in this. So Julia has some updated, like, little pieces of numbers, and then there's, I think, maybe, but, and then there's also sort of the conversation we need to have about, are we the general fund transfer in the 3 years and all of those things that we've been having over and over again. And I'm gonna really like, we're gonna have we have another spot on the agenda to have this conversation on Friday. And on Friday, I hope folks like really come with opinions. But there's a new piece that I asked Julia to put in here, which is in the governor's recommended budget. He recommended that there was a general fund transfer to the education fund of $10 million. That purchase and use statutorily moves to the transportation fund. Which could create sort of an inadvertent hole, what's the opposite of inadvertent? Avertent? Is that a word? An inadvertent hole. Anyway, intentional, thank you. I really wanted the words work. An intentional hole in the education fund year over year. That seems not possible in this education fund moment. But one possible solution is while we make that shift of purchase and use to the transportation fund, but what if we take something in the general fund that has a split and change the ratios of that thing in the general fund? So Julia's that's also in the Outlook, just for fun.
So sorry, we're looking at the.
No, it's Julia.
That's a row, actually, what I was just describing.
Good afternoon, Julie Richter, Joint Fiscal. There are a few documents on the committee page under my name. Two of them are the same as every week, the annotated guide and the yields bill decision points. There's a new Ed Fund Outlook, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Before walking through what is captured in each of the columns, want to do a little bit of level setting. So the first piece is that we have now included the updated budget data that was just shared by the Agency of Education. Because we don't have all school district budgets, for the school district budgets that have not yet been submitted, their education spending, we're still carrying the December 1 projection. That spending data has come down by about, that education payment has come down by about 30 million compared to the December 1 letter projection. So that's now included in all of the FY27 scenarios. That's the only underlying data change to the modeling compared to last week, but it's a significant one. The other piece that the chair mentioned that exists in all of these scenarios is a change to the revenue picture, to the ongoing revenue sources to the education fund. So as you know, in current law, 1/3 of all purchase and use tax is dedicated to the education fund and 1/4 of all meals and rooms tax. What the chair asked me to model is, what if 10 million were to be phased out of the education fund for purchase and use, and that were to be replaced by 10 million from meals and rooms? Net, it's 10 million up, down, and then 10 million back up. So it's not going to have an impact on the FY27 scenarios that we're looking at, assuming that the movement of that purchase and use tax out of the ed fund is exactly the same as the meals and rooms tax moving into the education fund. So that's what we're seeing captured in all of the lines 4 and 5.
Can you help me understand, whoa. And
Do you want me to go back?
no, please don't.
I thought you were going to ask me to make it bigger.
I appreciate you anticipating my needs that way. On row 5, the comparison between column A and column B, and that's 13 million and not 10 million, is that because
That's because they're different years.
Yep, okay, great.
So, so column A is FY26, and then column B forward through the right is FY27. So if you were to be looking at the Ed Fund Outlook from last week, and you were to be looking at the FY27 purchase and use tax, it would be 51.9 million. But we've decreased it by 10, which is why we have the 41.9.
And then the row 5 would be 76 less.
Exactly.
Yeah, Representative Burkett.
Which tax is more stable, purchase and use tax or rooms and meals tax? Which one varies more?
That would be a great question for my colleague Ted Barnett, who is the expert on our consumption taxes.
And we will schedule him to answer that question soon, because it's a great question.
I have that question also, and then the other question I had, so I thought, well, maybe we just always knowing what we want to have transferred to of the purchase and use tax to transportation. You just, of course, every year it would be negotiated, but you just say, okay, this year it's 10 million and we'll take the percentage we need this year from the general fund to cover the 10. And then the next year it's another 10 or whatever it is. And you just do that calculation each year. Okay, it looks like 1/5 of it, if you talk about fifths, 1/5 of it, because the big purchase and use year might be 13, and then so good. They get the 13 plus the 10 plus or whatever it is.
I want to make sure I'm understanding you because I feel like you're describing what the previous outlooks that we've looked at did, which was essentially say, okay, we're just talking about dollars and not ratios. And so we're moving $10 million from the general fund to the transportation fund because that's how much money is needed this year.
I know.
Okay.
I'm trying to say, if we make a permanent 1/5 of purchase and use to go to transportation and then versus something would change from year to year.
Yes.
So, I mean, to me, you'd take the just make the adjustment this year and then you live with whatever. They live with whatever purchase and use gives off and we live with whatever rooms and meals gives off, up or down.
Which is
Then,
like it's like
Yeah.
we're doing here.
and
Okay.
then the question is, how likely are we to have, how stable will that, rooms and meals be, and will it go up? Hopefully.
Yeah.
And help the ed fund even more.
And I want to be, so this was intended as sort of a revenue neutral proposal, but we can get more from Ted about that. Representative Julia and then Representative Brannigan.
One piece that I will add, which perhaps, I tried to be really clear in the labeling of lines 4 and 5. Perhaps it's not clear. It would be an outstanding decision of what percentage of looking at purchase and use tax, what percentage of the split would be going to the T fund and what percentage of the meals and rooms split would be going to the ed fund. So this isn't saying meals and rooms tax, 1/4 of total plus 10 million. The decision could be, I'm making this up, 30% of meals and rooms tax dedicated to the ed fund, which would be a 5 percentage point increase.
And I think that we would need Ted to help us. see that.
Exactly.
Representative Brannigan?
Well, I'm not really clear on what we're doing here. The purchase and use tax, the estimate for that was like 150 million. The estimate of what it was gonna bring in, right? 150 million
Total for the year.
total for the year, and we get 1/3 of it so far, current law.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 50 million. That's where we're getting 50 million. And the proposal, well, 2 proposals back, the proposal was for us to shrink down that 50 million to nothing over 5 years.
Mhm.
10 mil a year
Mhm.
back to the transportation
Mhm.
funds. So they get their 2/3 plus 10 and 2/3 plus 20 and 30, and on the 5th year, they get it all.
Mhm.
Okay, so first, before I stop, how did we get in column B down to 41.9? So that's only 8 million, right?
No, so that is, are you looking at the difference between columns A and B? We're looking at 2 different fiscal years.
Yes, but
So-
shouldn't B should be 40. Oh, no, it shouldn't.
B should, if there were no change to the split of purchase and use tax, column B would have 51.9 million coming in from purchase and use tax in FY 27 per the economist forecast. And here this is saying it would have been 51.9, but 10 million is being dedicated to the transportation fund, which leaves us with the 41.9 seen in column row 4.
Okay, I think I remember now seeing that in some scenario and wondering at the time, where did that come from? So, okay, great. We just got the answer to that one.
I think you've helped me figure out a better way of explaining what my intention was here. So the governor's proposal was to permanently move money from the ed fund to the transportation fund for next year,
Yes.
but to only temporarily move money from the general fund to the education fund to replace it.
And is that our idea?
That idea was the governor's idea. What I'm saying is, okay, let's take the governor's idea, Governor Keene's idea. I mean, I don't know if it was his personal idea, to move purchase and use permanently, more of it to the transportation fund, but also replace it with a permanent source. So we don't have this mismatch of permanent and one time, but in fact have permanent and permanent. I am totally silent right now on this idea of the year after. I just like, let's even just talk about this year first so that our brains don't explode. Representative Higley has been
Thank
waiting.
you. Julia, do we know what those two taxes have done over the past 5 years?
Ted can follow up with that. The answer is yes, but I don't know that. And I would like to phone a friend.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's not here. I did not think to schedule him in. Sorry.
He's doing pre-K.
Which, this is a great moment. The pre-K hearing that was supposed to be on Friday, but got canceled because of snow is rescheduled. But the other two, we are not joining them because frankly, we took all of the testimony that is being given at that joint hearing is the testimony that we heard over the course of those 5, 4, however many sessions we had on it. But I would love for 2 committee members, maybe one from each party, to go hang out with those folks and report back. That's at 2:30. And much thanks to Representative Burkhardt for reminding me about that. So, yes, if in 10 minutes, I would like 2 of you to go away and go there.
Not permanently.
Carol, let's go. All right.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so you can stay for 10 more minutes. No, you're staying for 10 more minutes. We're good. Okay, great. It's room 11. That's great, thank you. You have matching names, it's perfect. You sit across from each other, love it, thank you. Okay, Representative Maslin.
Yeah, and what I like, Madam Chair, about your revision of the language of robbing Peter to pay Paul is if we're not permanently robbing the education fund. Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
it's a much better idea as recently explained. Thank you.
Just reminded myself, Meals and Rooms is general fund.
Generally speaking.
Okay, any other thoughts or questions pending Ted testimony on rows 4 and 5? Yes,
I don't, I mean, well, no, I'll wait till 10.
okay, and I'm certainly not taking like the end of the questions as consent. I'm just,
And I have a lingering question for Julia, but it can wait. It's sort of related to this, but not.
okay, well, I think we're ready to go to other columns if we want to.
Cool.
The 4.2, and our last lady who testified, 4.2 was the estimated increase for school tax over statewide average. What does that mean for our people?
So I would actually rephrase what the 4.2% is reflecting the education spending. Kelly's nodding. So that's the estimated increase in education spending growth compared to the prior year.
Can you show us the row?
And I'm realizing right now that these rows are not plugging back what they should from the model. So this is a typo on our behalf, but this should say 4.2% rather than the 5.8% that was reflected in the Assembly letter. I apologize for that. I'll follow up.
Row are you in?
Well, it's not here because that's my mistake, but it should be in row H. It should say the 4.2 rather than the 5.8%. The challenge is that we don't have all school budget data in yet. So the school budgets that the agency has not yet received are still carrying the December 1 letter projection, which is either what the district told the agency they projected or 5.8% growth.
So when we change that down to 4.2,
It's already included in all of the modeling. So these rows up here, this is probably more information than you want about my spreadsheets, but rows 1 and down are the outputs of all of the modeling that we're doing, as 2 are rows A through F. The following G, H, I, and J are summary lines that we need to update each week, which is why you're not seeing the 4.2 there. So basically, what does that mean? That means that school district budgets, school district's education spending, growth compared to the prior year is coming in lower than was originally forecasted in the December 1 letter, which means all else equal, property taxes will need to increase less because the education fund total uses are not as large as they were forecasted to the December 1 letter.
We do our columns again.
Yep, so,
We're just gonna keep on repeating the things until we all like.
so these are the columns that the chair asked me to include, with the budget updates. So column B, this is using that updated budget data that Kelly presented, same, the grand list and long-term weighted ADM data that we have updated, and all of those December 1 assumptions, which are, we use the entirety of the ed fund surplus to uniformly lower property taxes on average, and we solve for an average bill change. You'll recall that the December 1 letter forecasted an average bill change of 11.9% compared to the prior year. Because education spending has come in lower than forecasted in the December 1 letter, after resolving for the rates and yields, the average bill change would be 10.1%. With no one-time money beyond the ed fund surplus which we used. Increase compared to the prior year. Yeah. So. Yeah,
Then would that be apply, what if we did other things?
so then the next column C is using the 104.9 million of general fund to uniformly lower property taxes all in FY 27. So of course, that would mean that property taxes would not even make up that 104.9 million. And that would result in a uniform average increase in FY 27 of 3.8%. But of course, that would be a one-time buy down like what we looked at last week.
And then what would happen the year after if we did that?
The year after column C, that's where, if you remember sort of that image of like pushing the increase forward, we would see all else equal in FY 28, there would be a significant increase in property taxes because property taxes would need to make up that difference and then any increase on top of that.
So we'd likely see, if all else was equal, we'd likely see an even higher average bill increase than the 10.1.
Yes.
And just to connect a few conversations, if we remember back to when Tom Cavett was here with us, our expectation of revenues going forward into all three funds is our growth is slowing in really significant ways. And so the money that we have this year for the transfer is not money that we will necessarily have in out years for the transfer, and likely won't have in out years for the transfer. Because the economy is slowing. Unpredictable. Okay, what happens in column D?
Column D is if 1/3, this is that idea of using 1/3 of the one-time money in FY 27 and then saving 2/3 for the following years. So if 1/3 of the 104.9 million were to be used to uniformly lower property taxes, and then the other 2/3 were to be held in a reserve of about 70 million, the average bill change would be an 8% increase across all three classes: homestead, non-homestead, and income.
What is the range when you say average?
The range of the average bill change, the bill change, uh, very wide. It depends on so many factors that I don't know the bounds. And they're significant, and it's really important to keep in mind that it is an average change.
Let's do the next column.
The next column, column E, this is showing, again, we're using, or you would use 1/3 of the 105 million to lowering property taxes in FY 27. But the entirety of that 1/3 would be used to lower homestead property taxes. There would be no one-time money dedicated to lowering non-homestead property taxes. So again, you have the 70 million, 69.9 million in reserve. You're still using the 105 million. And the homestead and income average increase for 1 year in FY 27 average would be an increase of 5.4%. Because no monies would be used, one-time monies beyond the ed fund surplus would be used to lower non-homestead. Non-homestead would still experience the same 10.1% increase on average.
And what happens in the final column?
The final column, column F. Again, this would be using 1/3 of the 104.9 million of one-time in FY 27, but then it would be split in half, so into 6. And 1/6 would be used to lower homestead property taxes, average bill change, and 1/6 would be used to increase the property tax credit. So property tax credit that folks are seeing on their FY 27 bills would be increased by 13%. That would result in an average homestead and income average bill increase of 7.7% before factoring in the increase in the property tax credit.
Before Representative Maslin goes, Representative Brannigan and Odious is probably a good time for you to.
I keep asking the question only somewhere and I forget to look. Can we have it presented in this committee geographically where are people taking up the credit and help paying?
I can ask the tax department.
Age wise, I feel.
We are not gonna ever know the age. We would have to change lots of stuff to find that out.
All right.
Okay.
Well,
You want to know where this money is going?
The help.
yeah, and kind of. Like to know what he's saying. Yeah, that.
We can have the tax department come in. I'm just fairly sure they're not gonna be able to
Yeah.
do the age part tonight, but we will have them come in.
We have a
Um,
spreadsheet, we just don't have a map. And without age, yeah.
But there's a town by town spreadsheet. Enjoy room 11.
It's in 11, that's. Carol, I can take notes if you don't want to go.
No, I'm going.
That'll be so fun. Maybe I should go and you guys can. I think Representative Maslin was next up.
Yeah, thanks. Couple of things that you've mentioned in the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes, your favorite residential tax rates versus non-residential, since we, in some communities or take advantage of the system of balancing one against the other. I very much appreciate it. I did see it. We'll see where it ends up. Right, that makes sense. So, right. Appreciate it.
Julie, one of the columns that's missing is one they used to have on there before, which was applying 100% of the general fund transfer to non-primary homeowners, and that is now not on spreadsheet items.
That was a direction from your chair.
I'm just trying to like have a few.
I thought it made sense to take it off. I just wanted to point out that it's not there.
Yeah, and we can add it back in.
It's,
No.
Okay.
it's also,
Oh,
there are other permutations you've looked at that are also not included. It's that dance of how many columns, too many columns.
we're there.
With respect to the decision to put the extra 6 towards a property tax credit, that's just increasing the credit that people receive in the proposed program. Has there been any discussion of planning to extending the health eligibility, be who's eligible?
I haven't had that conversation. I think, Julia, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah.
Sort of the implications. of that.
It's a great question. I would say that the challenge is because these are credits that were already earned in FY '26, the data hasn't been collected for folks to expand the property tax credit that would be showing up on FY '27 bills. So in order to expand the property tax credit eligibility, not just the amount, not just the credit that folks are seeing on their bills, it would need to be a change for the upcoming year in order to collect sufficient information. The other place that you can work on that, which would be reflected on the 28 bills, because it's the credit earned in 27, is the income yield, which in these scenarios, the income yield is being calculated for an average change that corresponds with the homestead. That's a policy choice. But beyond that, I'm not aware of a way to expand the credit eligibility for the credits that have already been earned.
That is a very worthy pursuit. So
If there are ideas, I'm happy to work on them. I just don't know how it could be done.
and I think one of the, all other policy sort of implications aside, I think one of the real benefits of the property tax credit changes made in 73 was that that system, you can adjust thresholds in a way that does not have sort of all the same bubble effects that this does. Representative.
Sure. Remember correct. Last year in the yield bill, there was what, $77 million of buy down and another 40 million in a reserve that we used, correct? But we put it all towards, we didn't break it out in regards to residential or non-residential, it was across the board.
Correct.
We almost always do it across the board. A few years ago, we did something with the property tax credit that was slightly separate. Is that true?
Yeah, a couple of years ago or a few years ago, there was a one-time increase to the property tax credit. And a uniform average bill change. There is precedent which precedes me, so I don't know in which year of doing them at different rates. And you can do that, it's just a policy decision. But over the last, this is my 5th year doing the outlook in this committee, it's been uniform every year. With the exception of the one-time increase to the property tax credit.
Anyone else? Thanks, Julia.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're gonna take a break. And we'll be back here. Oh. At 3? That seems better. But that's what we're doing. 3.